Well, I asked Adam, did the stuff I sent help? And he goes, yeah, I don't know. Now I actually had to go in the lab, which I've lost access to, and then I asked one of the TMEs, can you run this for me? Great. Just save it to a file, mail it to me. I'm glad it worked out.
Yeah. Welcome back here. Not special.
Yes. You mean it has no Wi-Fi? Oh. Well, you have the option of either just giving me raw text file. Okay. So he's using an iPad because his laptop froze. So I told him to just use EtherPad. And then Dave, you're taking notes. Are you okay?
Sure.
Yeah. So you and Roman are going to tag team. So on the EtherPad. I don't remember what I put on the slides.
So for the Jabber, for the Jabber.
Adam. Adam, you're a jabber, right?
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Please,
Well, it's because Thursday, 6 o'clock, people want to leave. Yeah, we almost could just do a little round table thing. But we've got stragglers coming in, so. No, that's too cold. It's freezing in there.
Thank you. Yeah, good to see you. Ah.
Okay, I guess I have to get up. Is this working? Wow. But do I really need it? Probably. Okay. Okay, let's get started so that I optimistically think we can maybe get done early. All right. So good afternoon to the almost next to two last sessions. Well, the last session for today. So you are in the MILE working group. If this is not where you want to be, it's up to you. So I'm not going to read through the note well. I think everybody knows that by now. So let's go on to the next slide. Okay, so we'll give a quick status of where we are now with respect to the different drafts. Then we'll have Stephen provide updates to the two Rolly drafts that he's been working on. Then, I'm sorry. We're going to have the guidance draft first, update, then Stephen, and then I don't think I need the full 10 minutes. Literally, I'll just need 2 minutes to provide an update on the XMPP. And then Take will provide the update on the new submission for the JSON binding. So thank you, Adam, for being the Jabber scribe, and Roman and Dave for being the note takers. And Dave is passing around the blue sheets too. So with that, let's get started. Okay, so where we are now, when you look at the charter and the work that we set out in this working group, we currently have 3 drafts that have been adopted as working group drafts. So in the base spec, it's representing IODEF in JSON format. So that's the new draft that Taki will be talking about. And then for the transport, there's 2 drafts, one that's Rolly based, and the third one is the XMPP based one. Okay, so that is it. I think we can move ahead and provide the guidance.
Hello, I'm Yo Suzuki from NICT. I will present the status of guidance draft. And this is the agenda. At first, this draft aims to provide guidelines for IODEF implementation. And also about representation of common security indicators and use cases so far. And then I will show the status update of the draft. And then, sorry. Oh, sorry. I will try to. At first, I will show the status of the draft, and then show the update from previous draft. And finally, show to-do list and conclude that. Next slide. This is the draft status. The guidance draft is currently in OS48 state. Panos and I are fixing editorial mistakes in communication with RFC editors, and it almost completed, I think. And it will be RFC 8274 very soon. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Auth 48 means you're pretty much done. You're just in the final. You have 48 hours, then it goes to RFC. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Well done. Oh, yeah, it could take. It's a literal 48.
Okay. This is updates from the previous draft. Most of the comments and reviews are about editorial mistakes, and we fix these mistakes. And the important one is a review from Benoit. He pointed out the inconsistency of the XML lang attribute, which is optional in the RFC 7970, but it's mandatory in the schema. And this problem was presented by Take-san at the last mile session. And probably, I think it will be fixed in errata. Next slide. And other comments it shows. This is most of that is also editorial mistakes, and through the fixing the editorial mistakes, comments from the Catherine. It's I think it's important, and she says what is what is the preference of this draft to be informational or to be a BCP? And the answer of authors is it stays as informational, and chairs also agree that. So, and finally, we are now fixing editorial mistakes with RFC editors. Next slide. And this is to-do list. Only the to-dos is to pass all 48 states after fixing editorial mistakes. And finally, thank you for all reviewers, chairs, and ADs, and working group members. Thank you. That's all.
Good job. Okay, so next up, Stephen, you want to provide us updates on Rolly? You want to do Rolly first, I presume, then the Rolly sister. Yeah. Oh, okay.
Should be good to go.
Sorry, one second.
No problem. I sent the updated version.
Oh,
It's not the end of the world.
I didn't get it. So, Dave, did you upload it? We never got it.
This
Is
is
this the one?
This is the one. I have no idea. I wrote the
We
slides.
never
I
got
don't know
it,
what they
so-
look like. Yeah, my email scripts it. All right, doesn't matter. Okay, I am Stephen Banghart from NIST, and I am here to provide, hopefully, the kind of last status update here on the work that we've been doing on the Rolly core document. So the version 14 was just posted like this morning, actually, I think. So the data tracker now represents version 14. So I'm going to go ahead and walk through the current status of the draft here. And if you could go to slide 2 for me here. Thank you. So the document is in IESG review. Our last blocking issue was an issue with our usage of .well-known registrations. We have resolved that issue with the remaining members of the ISG that had those discusses, and we updated that in version 14. I think I'm going to talk a little bit more about this issue later on a slide to kind of clarify what exactly changed, what the impact is, and what it's going to mean for the draft. But ultimately, it means that the IANA registration for .well-known has been removed from the draft, is kind of the long short of it. And I'll get into a little bit more detail on a later slide. So since IETF 99, we've had a very successful AD review, a successful art review, successful IESG review. We've made a ton of editorial changes. The document is in a much better place. Always, it continues to improve. So really happy with all the review we've been going through. We've had a couple minor normative changes, nothing that is particularly implementation breaking or anything that really should be too much of an impact. So these are small changes. So next slide, please. So I'm going to really quick walk through all the changes that have happened since Prague, just to make sure that everyone is up to date with the things that have happened. So versions 9 and 10 came very quickly, one after another, and this reflects pretty much all the changes that happened during the AD review. This included some editorial changes. We adjusted the language that we use when we're talking about TLS. Primarily, we recommend against the use of TLS 1.30 round trip time resumption. There are some nasty replay attacks that come into play with that feature enabled that are particularly damaging to RESTful services and that are just not compatible with the kind of security nature that Rolly is dealing with here. and so we recommended that that feature be turned off in TLS 1.3. It's not normative, it is not a must, but we do recommend that in the draft for security purposes. And we also updated our security references in security considerations. Next slide, please. Version 11 was the ART review. We updated TLS references, making many references out to 7525. This allowed us to shorten the section, make it easier to read, make sure that people weren't slogging through these like 4 paragraphs of text that is really horrible to read. Now it's much cleaner. We reduced the severity of requirements around the / resource. I think, yeah, it's /. This allows implementations a little bit more freedom around how they deal with the root resource. We were a little bit, what we felt was, and the art reviewer felt overly restrictive with that root resource, preventing implementations and servers from actually being able to use that resource for other things. So there was concern with that. Roman?
Roman Danilio, CMU. So the relaxation on the / resource, is the language now in the Rolly CSER draft consistent?
The language in the Rolly CSER draft remains the same. So
does that need to be made consistent based on that feedback?
no, there's no consistency issues that happen there. The language in the CSER draft, as far as I intend, unless the working group decides otherwise, to stay the same in CSER so that it more strongly supports the RID resource. Because that was a pretty core use case in that text in the original Rolly document when it was like Rolly 02 or something like that. So if the working group feels that in the CSER document it's no longer needed to be that strict in supporting that resource, then we can change that. But for now, to support that use case, I'd like it to stay probably a must in CSER. But again, we can talk about that. It's not a big deal. The other minor change in the ART review is that we switched from URIs. We switched from IRIs to URIs. We had a couple comments about that, about some problems that brings up, and some of the issues with the fact that current implementations of Atom were switching to URIs anyway, and that in order to maintain interoperability and compatibility, it would be best if we made that switch as well. We agreed with that review note, and we made that change in the document. Next slide, please. Versions 12 and 13 contain our IESG review. Again, this is more editorial fixes. Some example inconsistencies were fixed to reflect some of the new changes that we made. We updated our terminology boilerplate to BCP 14, which notably includes the better clarification around lowercase requirement text. And there were a few lines that imposed extra requirements on security consortiums that reviewers felt were unnecessary. Security consortiums know what they want to do best, and we needn't really be telling them exactly what they need to be doing. So we relaxed several of those. Okay, next slide. So this was version 14. These changes have been made over the on the GitHub repo over the last couple of days, if you've been following that. However, this version was just posted to Data Tracker yesterday. And the posting of this draft cleared 2 of our discusses, and the last discuss is hopefully pending being cleared here in shortly. This change removes the /.wellknown registration, which means that there needs to be a new way of reliably and automatably discovering Rolly service documents. So the IESG review talked about the fact that even with a .wellknown registration, it is not guaranteed for the service document to actually be located at this location, and that we weren't actually completely achieving our goal of full discovery anyway. And so we needed a more full solution. So we have removed that well-known registration, allowing those discusses to be cleared. And we've started work on a Rolly discovery draft to provide a fully specified, fully automated solution for service discovery for Rolly. We're investigating the relevant technologies, things like NA pointer and service records, DNS, SD, all these things. Dave?
I just wanted to provide, I think, a more detailed description of the discussion that we had with the number of folks on the ISG, but it was mostly Adam Roach and Ben Campbell's objections to the .well-known registration that we were working to address. So their concern was that we should be telling a more complete discovery story, that simply defining .well-known still doesn't provide a mechanism by which you can discover the host and port that you're accessing. We mentioned service documents as a way of doing that, but we actually had no normative requirements around that solution. So their preference was for us to define a more complete discovery story. So one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to start a Rolly discovery draft that could potentially bring back in the work that we pulled out. Now, there's a number of different ways to go about doing this discovery scenario. There's the service record approach, which we hinted at in the original Rolly text that we could continue to pursue. But there's also something called a NAPTR, a NA pointer record in DNS, and what that allows you to do is to generate a URL that can then be used for accessing the service. And one of the points that that they brought up that I think really convinced us that we should probably revisit this issue is that in a multi-home to multi-tenant or in a multi-tenant environment, you may decide to have different service documents, but within the same domain. And so using something like the NAPTR record and DNS would actually give us a way of being able to support that. So we want to go back to the drawing board and try to come up with a more flexible approach to supporting discovery. So our intent is to work on that and then submit a draft as soon as possible, probably in the around the first of the year to cover these issues.
Yeah, we want this out as quickly as possible. We know it's something that's important. In the meantime, we've provided text in the Rolly core about guidance on how you may distribute that URL so that people can find your service, places that you should put it using link relations in your web page, stuff like that. So we've provided some guidance on the best way to do that, and we're really fast tracking, working as hard as we can on this discovery draft. And then some minor errors that we fixed in the schema that we noticed that were not major changes. They were just formatting errors that we noticed. So next slide. Okay, so that is all the changes that we made. That takes us all the way up to version 14, which is the most recent version on the data tracker and is the version that has all these discusses cleared. So I want to thank everybody for their review, comments, advice, and contributions. It was a lot of people kind of worked together to make this as best as it could be, and it was a collaborative effort. So thank you to everybody. Hopefully, we get this thing done. We're hopefully in the right direction. And as I said, we are working on this discovery draft. Okay. So there has been some updates to the extensions that we've been working on. I talked about the software descriptor one in the SACM working group. We've also made an update to the CSERT Rolly extension. We've been updating it to a new format and trying to reduce the amount of text in it. We really want it to be easier to read. We want it to be less long. So I'm going to talk I'm going to talk a little bit about the CSERT Rolly extension next and the changes that we made in that. So we created a template file that is used to create Rolly extensions. This is a kind of fill in the blank, build your own Rolly extension kind of file. That's something that we're currently hosting out on GitHub to share with people in the future. Is this something that we want to put on the wiki for Mile to have available for people? It's a file that provides an extension template. And on a wiki, that could be a more useful resource. Adam.
Hey, Adam Montville, CIS. Let me clarify. So do you have it publicly hosted or privately hosted in GitHub?
Privately.
Privately. Okay. So, and you gave Bill and I the template,
Yes.
right? Because we're working on configuration checklist
Yes.
extension, we went ahead and created a GitHub repository
And that one's
puts
public?
the template in there that's public, so
That's
we
public,
can
okay.
send that to the list. I
Okay.
built out a bunch of stuff in there so people can just duplicate it and do whatever. I don't know if that's okay with you guys, but
Okay.
whatever.
So public GitHub, awesome. We could do that and a wiki. We could do just the GitHub. Dave?
Dave Waltermeyer. So I think the one concern that we had was that, this template is useful to, for creating new extensions. So we wanted to come up with a way to make it as easy as possible for folks to find it that, that wanted to create a new extension. And I'm really concerned with just, putting it out on GitHub somewhere, because it's not clear how someone who is interested in Rolly would actually go out and find it.
We could provide a link to the GitHub.
So we're
on the
looking for
wiki,
ideas on
something.
how we might be more successful with that.
It's not clear if it's on the wiki either. We put things on the wiki, people don't look at the wiki. And so it's really up to the group to remember where it is and let them know where it is. Of course, we'll send out a link. If you guys want to put a link to it on a wiki, you can do that. You can put it in the wiki. You can do however you want. We just put it there for our own use, and it's there for anybody else who wants to use it as well.
So I'm not familiar with the wiki process. Who actually has edit rights on the wiki? Is that just the chairs, or is anybody?
Yeah.
Okay, that makes that a lot easier. So maybe a link to this repo on the wiki is a decent way of providing a link to this resource. So as long as nobody is horribly objecting to that, that is a link that I can
No,
provide.
think that's a good path.
Okay, perfect. Okay, next slide. So I'll try and go through this here. I want to talk about two issues that I'd like to have resolved in the CCERT extension. And I think that I want to talk to the group about it to try and figure it out. One of this is the one that Roman, we just talked about 5 minutes ago, about the slash resource for RID. So it's a must requirement in the CCERT extension at the moment that a server must implement the / resource if you are going to use the incident and indicator information types in the CCERT extension. We think that might be too restrictive on Rolly repositories that want to stand up incident and indicator repositories and would instantly have that resource be restricted. But we would like to take it to the group and see what the thought is. So we have two proposals here. One, that this requirement is removed from CCERT and effectively becomes exactly the same as it is in the Rolly core. That is optional if you want to support the RID endpoint. Proposal B, we don't make it a must. We downgrade that normative requirement, either downgrade it or remove the normative requirement, and instead provide a set of recommendations and guidance onto how you best make this resource and RID and Rolly all play together as nicely as possible.
Roman Dinelli, CMU. So can you explain why we want to make it different? Because as I recollect in the draft, we want to harden Rolly more than we want for RID. So we think we need to be more secure with Rolly. I'm sorry, with the CCERT draft rather than with RID. I'm missing something.
Dave Waltermeyer. So the text in the core Rolly right now, it says that the resource may be supported for compatibility with existing deployments that are using transport of real-time inter-network defense messages, RID messages over HTTP TLS. But the problem is what happens if you have a Rolly server that's supporting the CCERT information type and it doesn't have a RID, and the organization doesn't have a RID endpoint? Having it be a must requirement seems like kind of a not so convenient requirement if that's the case. So one of the things that we're thinking about and trying to clean that situation up is trying to adjust the wording in a way that would have it be sensical from that perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I think harmonizing it makes sense. I would just recommend in the CCERT draft, we explain why it's a must to explain exactly what you just said. Because right now I'm reading it, the / is a must as defined in Rolly note that that's stricter, full stop, no explanation. So
Are you suggesting that we make it like a conditional must in some way to say, like, if the organization runs a RID endpoint, it should?
yeah, I mean, that would make sense. I mean, just anything that would explain why there's a difference, would be great for clarity.
So yeah, one solution to this actually that I do not have as a proposal down here is to say make this a conditional must, as Dave put it. If you are supporting RID, and I forget the RFC number, I think it's 6535. If you're supporting that, you must support that / resource behavior as defined in the spec. Does that make sense as to what you were thinking?
Yeah, I would endorse that because it's understandable then why there's this distinction.
Okay, that makes sense to me. So that's a new proposal C that I think is probably the change that makes sense. Is there any objection at all to doing a conditional must, quote unquote, for that section? Okay, so I'll post that change to list and see what the response
Well,
is.
you're going to post an update.
I will post an update draft with that change.
Yeah.
Okay, I will post an update draft with that change. Okay, and this is the bigger one. Actually, I want to talk about, I don't know how much time am I using? Like too much? Not enough? I don't know.
We've been so loose.
Because that determines how fast I talk through this next section. I want to make sure.
Let's see, how many more presentations? You need?
Yeah, that's usually what happens. I'm used to it.
Okay. Why don't we give you 2 minutes?
2 minutes. I can do 2 minutes. Works for me. Okay. There are a large number of requirements in the CCERT document that are specific to when you are using IODEF in Rolly. This means that if you have an IODEF data format type in your Rolly repository, there are extra requirements on how your Rolly repository must behave. That means it's a longer spec. That means it's a more restrictive spec. That means that a repository that's carrying IODEF is behaving differently than a repository that is not carrying IODEF. The reason that is in there in the first place is because there are requirements that originate from an older version of Rolly. We need to review those IODEF specific requirements in the new context of a more generalized Rolly. I believe that those IODEF specific requirements can be reduced and removed such that Rolly repositories carrying IODEF do not behave differently than your other Rolly repositories. I think that increases interoperability, and I think that means it's easier for people to stand up IODEF Rolly repositories. So I don't have a proposal here, but I wanted to see if the group felt strongly about IODEF specific requirements in the CCERT document.
Chris Anasio, Carnegie Mellon. So are some of these like the requirements of you shouldn't use a referral link, you should use, or you should not use a whatever, a history in the referral in IODEF documents when they're used in Rolly?
Yes, it's also requirements on the IODEF document itself.
So I've never understood why we have those, especially in that it's XML and well structured, and the server should be able to convert that from an IODEF document into the links all by itself. Otherwise, this whole computer-to-computer communication thing is a myth.
Agreed.
Yeah, I absolutely vote for striking that.
Okay, noted. Thank you. So I will include that in the updated draft that I post as well. Luckily, thankfully, that will greatly reduce the length of the document, which makes it easier for people to read and look at, which is really, really great. Shorter documents get more people to read them, so that's very exciting. Okay, that's my 2 minutes. I'm done. That was maybe a little bit longer than 2 minutes, but that's what I do. Okay, thank you.
It's my literal 2 minutes. You were. Okay, so I'm up. I'll give some time back because I'm not going to take the full 10 minutes. So we put the XMPP, not we, the chair, put the I'm now just acting as an individual, sorry. XMPP grid draft went to last call, received still more feedback that it was issues with readability. So in an attempt to make it simpler, I think perhaps I cut too much text out, where I thought there was just too much redundancy or repetition of how the flow worked. In my endeavor to just say it once, I think I cut too much out. So for instance, there were comments to how one might do the discovery. I had taken those examples out, so I need to put them back in. As I was working with two of the commenters, those being Peter St. Andre, and now I can't remember the other gentleman's name. A lot of the confusion and comments that came from them is that they use the XMPP vocabulary and taxonomy, whereas we are mapping it slightly different. We're still using the XMPP protocol and the services, but using it to pub/sub and to broker the sharing of security information, which is slightly different. So in my conversations with Peter, his light bulb kind of went out and said, really what we need to do is to just do that mapping of their vocabulary to our vocabulary. And when I started explaining the use cases, he actually found the SACM terminology and said, let me use that as my reference. It really helped him. And as it turns out, where we originally thought we would, he said, it may just be easier for me to start from scratch. It ended up that we didn't need to once he found the terminology draft, right? So next slide, please. So basically, I want to thank Peter because we've had several conversations now and interchanges. He's really helping me improve the draft. We're not quite there yet. So would still encourage you to look at it and let us know if we're in the right directions. But I do know that we need to put tighter focus on how the broker function and discovery works. So some of that text needs to be put back in. Next slide, please. And we need to add those examples back in. So whereas before, yes, I took the lazy route and referenced JEP 268, not from the whole notion of how it was used, but really to show how it was referencing the IODEF schema, which as it turns out, we don't need to do at all. So I just need to recraft examples to show how to do that. So we ran out of time, just no excuse. We just ran out of time. And our plan is to revision it again. As an author, and given all the comments, I think it's worthwhile to reissue another working group last call. But that's not up to me because I'm the author. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you very much for that presentation. Any comments? Okay, thank you very much for the presentation. Any comments or question? If not, thank you very much.
Okay.
So let me talk about the JSON binding of the IODEF draft. So thanks to the previous discussion, we just made a 0.1 version of the JSON mapping draft. Go on, please. Yes. So this is the current status of the draft. So based on the discussion in the IETF 99 in Prague, we established a new working group draft. So in 0.1 version, we finished writing from the beginning to the end finally. So we would like to ask you to review. And also we would like to ask co-author of the draft. And I intentionally asked Roman to join us for the editing. And Roman agreed to join the editing. Thank you very much for accepting
Taki,
that.
You have to stand in the, yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes. And if there are any other people who want to join the co-authorship, I also would like to welcome him or her. So please contact us anytime. And here we have 3 issues we want to discuss. First issue is about ML string. I mean, XML was really easy for describing information, but if I convert it into JSON, something has to be considered. Left-hand side is a direct translation to JSON. ML string is a bit wordy sometimes. If I have a Japanese description, it could be okay. But if we have an English description, we have to have a extra value, like a value MS Windows. But if I was a user of the JSON, I want to write like this way, right side, description, MS Windows. It's much more simple. And even for me, as a Japanese, I prefer to use English wording rather than Japanese, usually. So I prefer to have a description and description ML instead of having just description using the ML string. Does it make sense for you? Did you understand what I mean? Left-hand side uses ML string for English and for Japanese. Right-hand side uses ML string and also just string. I think just using string is usually easier and more compact. Because we use JSON, I want to make it more shorter. Our use case is for machine usage. So making it more compact is very important. So I want to hear your opinion on that. Could somebody provide any comment?
Yeah, so this is Nancy as just individual. So are you saying you're trying to optimize by not using a string type?
Using both string and ML
Oh,
string.
Okay, so on the right hand, you use string type
Yes,
to differentiate Japanese from English?
yes. For the English string type, for the Japanese ML string type.
Ah, got it, got it.
So Chris Anasio, Carnegie Mellon. So I'm fine with either version. I understand the desire. The more interesting question for me is that could you make it so that in machine to machine, so if I had a program that could translate the XML document to JSON, could it get it right? And then if I wanted to go back from that converted JSON representation back to XML, would it still have fidelity to the original?
Thank you for the comment. I think we found out anyway we have to provide a converter. If we use just a converter from XML to JSON, that converter uses @mac automatically, for instance. So
No, I mean I've looked through what's there now, the draft, and you touch on some parts of this, and I don't think it can be fully. I don't think it could be a dumb converter. I think you'd have to make a converter that understood IODEF. The question is, can we have rules? Can you make the draft? I'm okay with doing it, using string when you want to, as long as the draft can be written such that we can build interoperable converters that always do it the same way and can go back and forth.
I understood. So I will try to make sure that this point is clearly written in the draft so that we don't have any confusion in the future. Thank you.
Brett Jordan, I have a quick question on the _ML. Is that meant to be, I guess, a string type or a designation, or is that like some sort of encoding for language, or can you clarify what that is for me? Sorry.
Thank you for the question. Underbar ML is a data type provided for the multilingual support. That is a kind of basic design of the original IODEF in XML.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Dave Waltmeyer, I guess a clarifying question. So I was looking through the draft, and there are things in IODEF like string reference, or no, I'm sorry, software reference that make use of the XML any type, which means that you can embed arbitrary XML content in IODEF. If on the subject of round tripping, so being able to go from XML to JSON, back to XML, do you have any thoughts on how you'll support those round trips of that arbitrary XML content?
If I understood you correctly, this comment is not exactly on this issue, but
I'm
generally-
sorry. I can wait.
I mean, generally speaking, I'm just checking my understanding. So your question is about how we can convert any type to XML, right? That's very difficult, I guess. One way of converting any type into JSON is using a base 64, base 64 encoding. Based on that, I want to convert it back to XML. So I do not want to change any structure of the XML document. I just want to convert it into string by using base 64 coding. In this way, we can make it back to original.
Okay. Thank you.
So I will just come back to the mailing list later, but I couldn't hear any objection at this moment. So for now, I will try to go to the right-hand side solution. If you have any objection, please let me know later on the mailing list. So binary strings, yes, the X, how many minutes do I have? 5, thank you. Okay. The IETF version 2 has 2 types of binary string. First one is the base 64, other one is hexadecimal. I wonder whether we need both of them for JSON. I mean, for XML, this is fine, but for JSON, maybe we can use only one of them. That could be helpful, simplified. I don't know. I'm not expert on this area. From my viewpoint, just using hexadecimal for this conversion would be straightforward. If you have any comment, I would like to hear.
Chris Anasio, Carnegie Mellon, pick one and go with it.
Sorry.
He said to just pick one.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
My vote is you don't have to support both. Just pick one. Write down what that one is, and
Okay, thank you. According to Wiki, hexadecimal seems to be much more shorter.
Right. So back to Roman Denidu CMU. So back to the case where I want to take JSON, convert it to XML, and then convert it back to JSON, or the other way, XML to JSON back to XML. If you don't support both, you're going to lose that the original XML document was encoded with whatever representation that you dropped. Is that okay? It wouldn't be the same document then?
okay. So Chris Anasio, Carnegie Mellon. I'm going to stop saying the Carnegie Mellon part. Does it matter? Is there a nuance in the XML version where you'd care that it was what encoding?
I don't know. We would probably really have to sweep the IODEF XML document to ask whether there aren't certain places where data is, it explicitly says it needs to be hex encoded. I don't remember. We'd have to sweep it.
If only Taki had a co-author who could work on that.
I think
It sounds to me like it's an action to review and take into consideration. Yeah.
Thank you. I guess we have to review. Anyway, thank you for the discussion. Final one is, again, whether we can make it more simple or not. Last question. So I found out that these 5 classes in IODEX version 2 has only one element. For XML, this is very important for the semantic purpose. But for JSON, this is just extra space. Why don't we just omit those classes for JSON? That's a question. These 5 classes have only one element. For JSON, this is just the extra space. For XML, this is fine. And for this part stuff, we can convert it back to original. We can make a rule for changing back to normal.
So just to, Stephen Banghart, NIST, just to clarify, when you say remove these elements, or classes rather, you mean in XML, it's a class. In JSON, it just becomes a key value pair. And that's it, or completely remove them?
Put your mic. Oh, it did.
So my explanation was not so good. Sorry. We have three classes. The parent class use an element in the middle class. Element has only one element. That is the third class. So I want to just combine, link the first class and third
Oh,
class.
okay. I see. So it's a parent that only has just one child. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Roman Dinalu, CMU. Yeah, I mean, again, I think it's great to use the idea of can you go XML, JSON, and get the XML back? Those are container classes. I think a number of them don't have any kind of data. So what we would just have to put in the draft are more complicated parsing or converting guidance to say, hey, there's semantics in the nesting in JSON.
So it's okay to remove for JSON.
Yeah, I would say it's okay. I mean, we would just need to document that.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much for the discussion. My time is up, so let me come back to the mailing list on this. Thank you very much.
Okay, the battery is dying on this one too. So it has been well, I mean, in SAG, in all the rooms, the mics were terrible. Okay, so what I wanted to do was revisit the milestones and go through it just to make sure that both were on track and to figure out what we do moving forward. So currently, I'm scheduling to have the XMPP grid ready, hopefully after the Thanksgiving break, if not a week or so after that. So the intent there is to do another working group last call. Rolly is really completed. I mean, it's already going through in the, I just looked at the status and it's in the IESG. Oh, my machine just, so I'm not sure we're being optimistic, but we know that it's in the path for publication. That's the intent to say there. Let me defer the discussion on what we do with the Rolly CSERT because right now it's not an adopted working group item. So that I think merits more discussion. The JSON IODEF we did adopt. We've got the first draft. You just posted it today. So I would encourage people to review it. I think I might just put out a request for reviewers just so we could help get the momentum going on the list and go from there. So given that, it seemed like before we talk about the CSERT extension, we really had no other working group items. So we're looking at can we just talk about closing the group when we're done? But before I do that, let me talk about the Rolly CSERT extension draft. So it's currently not an adopted working group item. I had posted, I believe at least once, for review and adoption. We only received one review and comment, and the comment was that it didn't belong, it wasn't part of the charter. So even though we had, even though within the group here at the Prague face-to-face, we did the hum, there was enough interest. In the mail list, nobody but the one questioning response came to. So I wanted to open up the discussion here, but would also encourage that when we put the call for adoption and approval on the list, even though you've voted here, you also need to vote on the list. Does that make sense? Yeah? You guys have questions? No?
Roman Dinelu, CMU. I was just going to quickly respond to the fact that there was little feedback on the Rolly CSER draft. I have feedback. I promise to drop it on the mailing list as soon as I can type it all in.
Okay.
Dave Waltermeyer, I guess I'm a co-author on it. I actually have interest in
You are.
I actually have interest in implementing the draft. So I don't want to hide behind the fact that I'm, writing the draft. I actually plan on using the draft and think that that the work is important. Of specific interest is also being able to expand on some of the sticks related capabilities in the CSERT extension. That's something that's kind of underdeveloped in the current draft, and it's something that we would also like to do some experimentation around within my organization of using Rolly to serve sticks content as well.
Okay. So just to be clear, I don't believe sticks is in the charter. So we need to be careful with what we're trying to do.
Really quick. Agree on that. However, the CSERT extension declares all of the support for IODEF. You had that chart up at the beginning of the working group meeting showing the RESTful
Yep.
block for transporting
Yes.
IODEF there.
Yes.
So that CSERT extension is really combined with the Rolly core what fulfills that block on the little chart there.
And right. So I'm okay extending and saying that the CSERT draft, because it's mapping to Rolly, can be in charter. What I'm trying to say is I'm not seeing enough interest.
Right.
I'd like to see more than just one organization, I will say, right, that shows interest.
Right. And I think that's reasonable. I would welcome everybody to come and
Yep.
post stuff on list.
Sorry, I'm vertically challenged. Brett Jordan, editor and author of Sticks, co-chair of Taxi. I really like what you've done with Rolly, and I would like to work on a draft to make a JSON representation of Rolly, but I don't want to go off and do all the work if this working group is not interested in a JSON-based version of Rolly. So I would like to know if
Okay,
this...
can we, I'm talking about the Rolly CSERT draft first.
Oh,
So
I'm sorry. I
understand.
apologize.
No, that is totally fine. So we will put that question next. But I guess to this group, what I'd like to get a sense of is, again, is there enough interest and besides the authors to pursue the Rolly CSERT draft towards adoption in the working group?
Chris Anasio, Carnegie Mellon. I actually have read it. I just didn't post anything. I can post something.
Okay, so I'm okay reissuing the interest on the mail list, but again, I will reiterate, right, that if I don't see enough interest, sorry, if we the chairs don't see enough interest, I don't see how I can even make the call for adoption as a working group.
So I just would like to ask one question.
You need to speak up, Take.
Sorry. I have one question. I mean, I see the value of the CSAT extension if we can change the scope of the mile. As somebody said, maybe sticks is very important to support. I also think so. So if we can change the charter somehow and can support sticks as well, I also have interest. But if not,
Okay,
I'm
so-
just neutral.
That's a point well taken, but again, I don't believe sticks is in our charter. So once we get to that part, we can talk about, which is why we talk about no more work items. If there are, then we need to talk about rechartering the group. Okay, so I don't like humming. Is it okay if I ask for a show of hands? Huh? You want me to look at, you want me to put the charter? Oh, okay. Yeah, so I just wanted to get a sense of, because it's hard to talk in here. Show of hands, if there's enough interest, and I'll just put it, should I put out in the mail list to get review feedback as well as interest in working on the Rowley CSERT draft? Can I have a show of hands? Okay, so I will put it out and put the question on the list. Please make sure, just because you raised your hand here doesn't mean that it will propagate. So when I put it out to the mail, Adam, I get to chair this one. Okay, so with that, Brett, you wanted to put a JSON flavor to the CSERT?
To Rolly.
To Rowley. Okay,
Yes, I would be interested in working on and submitting a draft to this working group for a JSON binding, I guess you would call it,
sure.
for Rolly. But I don't want to go off and do all that work and write all the content if this working group is not interested in it at all. So
Okay,
I would like
so
to propose.
I'm running us over, so if you guys don't mind staying for another 3 minutes. Quick, Dave?
Yeah, I just wanted to, this is Dave Waltermeyer. I wanted to point out that we had this conversation at IETF 99, and I need to go back and check the notes, but my recollection was that there was strong support in the room to have us do work on creating a JSON representation
Okay,
for
so-
Rolly.
Let's get it so that you're supposed to be a note taker. Roman is taking notes, so we'll have it. So again, let's do a show of hands. Is there interest in the group to see work being done for a JSON representation in Rowley? Oh. Okay, so
What does that mean? What is like what does it really mean to do that?
So right now the Atom Pub data model is in X,
All in
the
XML.
Atom data model is in XML. This would be creating a constrained version of the Atom XML format that serves our purposes
Okay.
in Rolly. Because I don't think we want to go to the larger scope of creating a JSON version of Atom syndication format,
Okay.
because that's a much larger
we are
effort.
way over, guys. So Brett, I think you have the indication that there is enough interest. So you're welcome to put a draft together
Thank you.
and put it up on the list if you don't want to wait until the London meeting. So with that, I apologize, I ran us way over, but I think we have some marching orders. Have a good Thanksgiving, good holiday, and we'll talk over the list. Thanks, everyone.